Hi, I'm Yonit Levy of Channel 12 in Tel Aviv.
And I'm Jonathan Friedland of The Guardian in London.
And we are Unholy, two Jews on the news. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm doing all right, thank you, Yonit. And I know you must be with a spring in your step because you're about to unlock, aren't you, where you are?
I'm Jewish and in the news business. I don't think we ever have a spring in our step, but we are. Things are opening up fast. I would say maybe too fast. I mean, some fear that it's the same. We're making the same mistakes we made the last time around. The airport is going to open up. Schools almost completely opening up. The restaurants, the cafes, and even events for hundreds of people. And a lot of people feel like this is because the prime minister wants the country to open up, 2.5 weeks before the elections. He needs those visuals. But again, the sort of health experts in this country are really worried that this might be too quick. And the infection rate is still still pretty high. There are more than 4,000 new cases every day. So we're watching this, let's say carefully optimistic.
From here, it does look very, very fast. I mean, schools are going back here next week, but everything else is really, really slow. And people are very conscious that the Pesach holiday, the Passover holiday, is coming at the end of the month. And even there, the next stage, there's schools next week, and then the next ever so slight loosening of lockdown happens on March 29th, which is too late.
Yep.
For the Seder. So the idea of people sitting in the garden, families coming gathering together, that won't be allowed because that new easing comes too late. So we're going to be watching you very enviously all over there as you get that. But you mentioned election. I'm interested to know, Yoni, the kind of preparation that you are now immersed in, because, I mean, well, by now you're used to it, right? You've done this will be your sort of, what is it, fourth, fifth in 18 months or something crazy?
It's my fourth election night broadcast in 2 years. Fifth, if you count the American elections. All in all, my ninth election night broadcast. And when I mean election night, it's a whole night election night. I mean, 11 hours of broadcast. If I had to sort of put this in a normal country, like every 4 years, if we had elections, this would be a 36-year career. But I don't have a 36-year career. It just feels like that sometimes. So really, it's a big deal. You need to prepare for this a few weeks in advance, and it's. But
do you do physical training and all that? Because I've been a guest on these election shows, and you come in at 3 a.m. and then you go. But the host is there for some marathon session all night, and I've seen these news anchors with their sort of bananas and nuts for energy supply. And everyone always wants to know, how do you go to the bathroom, or how do you not go to the bathroom during an 11-hour broadcast? So I want to know all of it. What is your kind of pre-marathon training regime?
We don't. We're very tough Israelis. We just don't go to the bathroom for 11 hours. No, there's a signal, right, at some point during the night, because the first couple of hours you don't even have commercial breaks. So there has to be a signal where I'll look at our political analyst and I'll give him the sign, and he'll know that he has to babble on for 4 minutes straight, and I can run out and come back. Adrenaline is a powerful force. But why are we interviewing me when we should be interviewing
I'm interested in
the author?
In your exercise and fitness regime before you go on air.
It's not all the secrets in episode 8. What, are you kidding me? No, nothing? I mean, you're not suggesting any bribe, and he said I'd just give you all of my secrets? It's not bananas, I'll tell you that. But anyway, I want to interview the author of his 11th book, trying to make all of us look like procrastinators, coming out today. Your thriller, Jonathan. It is under the pseudonym of your alter ego, Sanborn. And the book is titled To Kill a Man. Please tell us a little bit about it.
Well, you're very kind to mention it. It is quite true that today is publication day. This is I am a lockdown victim, because this book was really meant to have had its big entry into the world in March 2020. And in fact, the date of publication was more or less the day lockdown began. So we're doing it all over again. It was all planned on the assumption that surely by March 2021, lockdown would be over. But guess what? The bookshops are still closed. But the book is To Kill a Man, as you said, is by my thriller writing alias and alter ego Sam Bourne. It's a thriller that asks the question really of, could a presidential candidate get away with murder? And that's because the opening action is a woman rising star lawyer, Natasha Winthrop, is attacked in her own home in Washington, D.C., but fights back and leaves her attacker dead. And some questions start emerging as various holes appear in her story. Is she telling the truth? Was she the victim of this crime? Or was she perhaps something else? It is, once again set in Washington, D.C. As you know, that's where I was a correspondent all those years ago. And it features my kind of, in a way, another alter ego, my regular protagonist, Maggie Costello, if you're Irish, Maggie Costello, everyone else would say. And she is a highly principled troubleshooter in Washington, Irish-born, lives in America, and she is there to see if she can somehow get to the bottom of this mystery and clear this woman's name so that the path is clear for her to challenge the incumbent and widely reviled president.
Okay, since I am a big fan of yours, you know this, not in a creepy Stephen King, Kathy Bates kind of way, but I'm a big fan. And I always wondered about that pseudonym. Because, why would you need, this is fun, me interviewing you. We can do this the whole program. Why do you need the Sam Bourne to write the thriller?
Well, the origin of it is that I first came up with a thriller idea back in the early noughties, and my very oldest friend, who also is my literary agent, said to me, he liked the idea. It was an idea that turns on a very Jewish idea, by the way, a Kabbalistic idea.
It's The Righteous Men?
The Righteous
That is the book?
Men, yeah. We can't say what the Kabbalistic idea is because that will be a spoiler, but it turns on that idea. And he said, look, I really like the idea, but the only problem is your name. And I said, well, what's wrong with my name? And he said, because it sounds like a pointy-headed columnist for a pointy-headed newspaper. And what he meant was it's sort of too kind of political, cerebral, and not kind of mass market. And he thought the idea was a mass commercial idea. And so, I said, fine, we'll think of something else. And we thought of this other name, Sam Bourne. There's a story behind that one day, I can tell you. And, he was proven right because the book did become a bestseller. And so after that, I was then chained to it. Happily. But obviously, once we'd had a hit, we couldn't change. So Sam Bourne is the kind of thriller writing, fictional side of my brain. And then, JF is the rest of me.
Okay, I'm just suggesting a character for your next book, like an exhausted anchor woman / podcast host who is on her way to her 9th election.
Don't joke. That's why.
In the middle of a pandemic.
Why do you think I was asking
realistic
you
enough.
About the day-night regime? That's because I'm gathering string and detail and bananas and nuts. I need to know all these things. You give me that great thing about the 4-minute signal, running to the bathroom, running back. I think there could be a setting there.
I'm glad to be of service to the Sam Bourne empire.
Yeah, I'm on it. Now, people didn't come here for all of this, Yoni. We are meant to be two Jews on the news.
But now they have. Now they realize
it's become two Jews talking about each other. We've got to talk about the news. And there has been some big news from your end that affects everyone in the whole Jewish world.
Exactly. So we have a lot of Jewish news to talk about this episode. So on Tuesday, Israel's High Court of Justice ruled that reform and conservative conversions to Judaism conducted in Israel would be recognized for citizenship purposes. It has already been recognized outside of Israel. So this actually, is relevant to a few hundred cases in Israel. But if you take a step back, you kind of need to see that it sheds a light on the fact that there's a huge number of people in Israel, about 450,000, who are considered Jewish under the law of return, meaning that they can enter, they receive Israeli citizenship automatically. But according to the chief rabbinate, and according to Jewish religious law, the halakha here, they are not Jewish. So that gap is creating a problem, and it's widening. Right now, the rabbinical institution controls so many aspects of our lives in Israel, mainly, marriage and death. By the way, Al Bundy and Married with Children said about 4 weddings and a funeral. Those are 5 things that are the same. But again, this is the aspect of civil life in Israel, which is essentially controlled by the chief rabbinate. And so here, this is what they feel. Again, the ultra-Orthodox that rule the rabbinate these days, they feel like this is a dent or diluting their power. But we should talk about, of course, the political sort of frenzy that ensued, because we are in the middle of an election. Everything that's happening here sort of has the amplified effect of that. First and foremost, the people who added fuel to the fire were the ultra-Orthodox Yahadut Torah party, or the United Torah Judaism party, who put out an election ad with dogs saying essentially Reformed Jews would even convert dogs into Judaism. This is, of course, incredibly offensive. You have Yair Lapid, who for him, this is something in the form of a political gift, writing in his Twitter page, there were regimes in the world that would use or compare Jews to dogs. Anti-Semites of all generations have done that. And now Yahadut Torah have joined them, and that is disgusting. These are Netanyahu's political partners.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that particularly the offence caused by that ad and Yair Lapid reaching back into his own family history, saying his father, famously a Holocaust survivor, remembered the sign in the Hungarian parliament saying no Jews and no dogs allowed. And the reason why I say that is that issue of Reform Jews, there are obviously some in Israel, some non-Orthodox, religiously aligned Jews, Reform and conservative. But where that point lands most is outside Israel, because, you look at American Jewry, for example, and a plurality of American Jews identify as non-Orthodox, either Reform or conservative, or actually the biggest category, just Jewish. But Orthodox are very much a minority in the United States and in the wider diaspora. And so, but particularly, people who are members of or affiliated with Reform or conservative, they exist in big numbers outside Israel. And so they will look, to the extent that they'll see this ad, but they will think, that's me you're talking about. That's my community, my rabbi. And it goes to why, in a way, this is such a resonant issue, because I know that technically, actually, this specific ruling doesn't have a massive impact on the diaspora because, as you said, they're already covered under the rules, conversions outside Israel. And this is really about the few dozen people who get Reform or conservative conversions inside Israel. Nevertheless, this is a hugely symbolic issue for the diaspora, because this question of who is a Jew is exactly the place where Israel and the Jewish diaspora collide. This is an issue that impacts on our lives as Jews in the diaspora, and yet is often determined or debated and discussed inside Israel. And almost, you would often see that those moments where the American Jewish leadership, for example, really confronted the Israeli government wouldn't be about a new settlement here or a military operation there. It would be on this issue. And it strikes me that, if there's one issue that really needs to be resolved globally in the Jewish world, it is this question, because it's not abstract, it translates into real world pain. There are couples one has met the other, they want to be together, one is Orthodox and their rabbi will not marry them, and therefore they can't be married, or children who are not recognized, who are somehow in limbo, cast as illegitimate, etc. So it really, really matters. It's bad enough that one denomination decides in Israel who can, as your 4 weddings and a funeral joke captures perfectly, who can marry and who can be buried where inside Israel. But actually the effect is, it can often be that they are determining this for the whole Jewish world, this one strand inside Israel. So this is seen, I think, and it's been really interesting seeing the reaction from American Jewish groups really welcoming it, saying long overdue, celebrating it, because this, they feel, is a step on the way towards legitimacy for them.
And they are making those steps very slowly. This has to say, we maybe should note that, it took 15 years for Israeli lawmakers to make any sort of decision. They didn't, so the court had to. The court rather reluctantly sort of held this hot potato and made the decision. As reluctant as a young, Jewish boy would be trying to sing Manishtana for the first time. I'm looking at you, Jonathan, when I say that. So they really didn't want to make this decision, but they finally did. And as you say, Israel is, for more than 70 years, not making a decision on who is a Jew, which means that the leading denomination here is the religion of procrastination. And we do need to say that there has been a battle between the Orthodox and the Reform Jews for more than 200 years. It's a rift that began even before the state of Israel. And what it says is, and what essentially, right, what are the Orthodox saying? They're blaming Reform Jews for assimilation, for turning a blind eye, for, they think, even in some cases, encouraging it, right? And the other part of it, the Reform Jews are saying, wait a minute, I'm saving Judaism. Judaism is reforming, right? It's a verb. This is what we are doing. We're bringing more people or making Judaism more acceptable. Now, I had a conversation with a very remarkable woman. She's Rabbi Angela Buckdell. She's a star of the Reform community in the United States. She's the head cantor and head rabbi of the Central Synagogue in New York. I met up with her about a year ago, and she said these, when I asked her, how did they relate to you in Israel? By the way, she's also half Korean. She has a Korean mother, a Jewish father. Of course, when she felt like Israelis look at her like as she's not Jewish enough, she had to go through the whole Orthodox conversion in Israel. But I want to hear a little bit of what she said about the relationship between diaspora Reform Jews and Israel. Let's listen in.
Really, that I feel like we've got in the Jewish state this monopoly on what religiousness looks like. And I actually think that a huge number of secular Israelis are just missing out. The idea is they're basically what I am, but they see it as but heaven forbid they call themselves Reform.
Really interesting hearing Rabbi Angela there, because in a way that's the heart of the question is this thing about saying, look, we are renewing Judaism because we are appealing to people who otherwise would just walk away. And in the American context, I've seen that brilliant report of yours from America. She was playing to packed houses in New York, right? The synagogue was just bursting.
Free coronavirus,
and there will be Orthodox synagogues around the world who will be looking at that with envy because they are not getting those kind of numbers. And the people who are coming are old and dying out, whereas her congregation, I remember from the TV report, were young and, from growing families. But she's asking there for Orthodox Jews to sort of welcome them and say, yeah, you're right. You're getting it right. That's never going to happen. Instead, the bar, I think, needs to be lower, which is just to say, look, I don't think you are the right kind of Jews, but you are Jewish. And for that basic recognition, I think that is essential. And your point about this has gone on for 200 years, absolutely right. It is a schism. And that Israel has, for the last 15, 16 years, very specifically, not wanted to touch it, is such a huge missed opportunity. Because what is a Jewish state there for, if not to resolve the huge questions of the Jewish people? In other words, here's a question which has gripped and divided Jews for 2 centuries. Surely the locus, the place for that to be resolved would be Israel. That's the whole point. If you go back to the sort of first Zionist thoughts, the whole point was create this state where these issues can be settled once and for all. And, the Knesset to see itself potentially as the sovereign body of the Jewish people.
You're making a very good and in a way tragic point. Something has changed in this country. And obviously at the beginning, the chief rabbinate was made out of many religious nationalists. Over the years, it turned over to the ultra-Orthodox, who are not a majority in this country, right? But they do have a lot of political power. And then it became more and more conservative, right? That is at least the sort of secular point of view looking at this. Now, the end of this story, what happened this week, and it ties into what we're talking about, is another red line, I would say, crossed by Yadut Torah, the same party. A member of that party, named Yitzhak Pindrus, said about any woman that goes through conversion in the military, there is a trajectory for that. There's a special course, is a shiksa, which is a derogatory term for a woman who isn't Jewish. Now, what is amazing about this is that the conversions done in the military are Orthodox conversions. They're not Reform. They're not conservative. These are Orthodox conversions. And he basically was putting out into the world the fact that the ultra-Orthodox don't really want this process, even if they in some form or another control it. He's basically saying no room for converts, which I think is, of course, when you look at the history of the Jewish nation, Jewish people, that is a problematic thing to say.
I think so. I think it does show you they have gone, even further rightward. They departed in some ways from their own history. You go back many, many centuries, and Judaism was much more comfortable with conversion. There is some evidence that it was even a proselytizing religion, evangelizing, looking for converts until our tormentors, our rulers, barred us from doing that. I think it was in the Roman period where Jews were prevented from proselytizing. And we have quite literally made a religion out of what was actually a prohibition and a limitation placed upon us. So this is something that really needs to be unwound.
Yep. So in this conversation under the title Unorthodox, or it was an exhausting week to be Jewish in Israel, let's talk about the exhausting week to be Jewish in the UK.
Oh my, it is true. We are doing the sort of the Jewish stuff here in quite a major way, because it has been a bit exhausting. And, you know, in a way, not just a week, because it's been ongoing. But no, it did sort of come to a head of sorts. It started in a very indirect way, actually, which is that the Scottish Labour Party, which has its own leader, elected a new leader in the form of Anas Sarwar, and the deputy leader of the overall UK Labour Party welcomed his success by saying he was the first ethnic minority leader of a British political party. And because Anas Sarwar is a Muslim. And immediately people popped up and said, but hold on a minute, there was a Jewish leader of the Labour Party just, less than 6 years ago in the form of Ed Miliband. There was a Jewish leader of the Conservative Party before that, name of Michael Howard.
Right.
And there was, of course, a Jewish prime minister in the form of Benjamin Disraeli. Some argument about him because, talking of proselytization, his father had Disraeli converted to Protestantism. But, by no stretch is Anas Sarwar definitely the first Muslim leader, but definitely not the first ethnic minority leader. And it seemed to illustrate this point that when people on the left or progressives are talking about minorities, somehow, to coin a phrase, Jews don't count. And I say to coin a phrase because that is the title of a new best-selling book here by the British Jewish comedian David Baddiel, which it surprised people because it really is a genuine bestseller. It seems to have struck a chord. That sparked a whole row. There was a discussion on the BBC's daily politics TV show called Politics Live, where they literally had a sort of chyron in TV language, a caption along the bottom of the screen saying, "Are Jews an ethnic minority?" And a panel.
Are Jews an ethnic minority? Why is the question? Are we an ethnic majority?
In Israel, you're an ethnic majority. That's what we've been talking about.
That's it. But that's what we got.
But people thought it was weird to be saying this. And also the panel, apart from one person, was non-Jewish. And there they were sitting around debating. And people were saying, can you imagine them having a discussion about Black Britons or Muslim Britons? Are you or aren't you? And having four white people discussing this, and it was seen as really offensive. The BBC executive in charge of the programme didn't really back down, but if anything, slightly doubled down and said, I was just government statistics, you're not on the government census, and therefore it really got very kind of vexed. It's just, it's been an uncomfortable experience. Yeah.
But I'm trying to understand the question coming, are Jews an ethnic minority? Is that a question that stems from this sort of left feeling like Jews have become privileged, successful, let's say even white privilege, quote unquote, and thus don't need to be related to as a persecuted minority, as a downtrodden minority? Is that where this comes from? Is that, at the heart of that discussion?
Yeah, this is, I think so. I think, so the phrase was, on the BBC was, should Jews count as an ethnic minority, ? And the word count there,
wow.
And
count
again
is...
and in the title, Jews don't count, means there's a lot, that word is doing a lot of work, because it means, should they get the perceived protections and, in a way, standing in progressive circles that being an ethnic minority confers? And this is what the argument is about. In some ways, it's this idea that implied there is, well, look, and in fact, the host of the show, and just to complicate things, she herself is Jewish, did ask the question, she said, I think, many Jews have succeeded in reaching high political office, therefore don't need to be seen as a group needing recognition in the same way as others. And that implied there is this idea that, look, you guys, you've done well, you're affluent, you're successful, even perhaps powerful, and therefore, you don't count as a beleaguered ethnic minority, which is implied in that phrase. And what, David Baddiel in his book has been arguing very effectively is, well, look, my grandparents were pretty affluent. They owned a factory and they were successful back in Germany. It didn't protect them from their fate under Nazism, and that's a real experience of his. And similarly, the fact that he himself, not all Jews are white, but he himself is white, again, he says doesn't give him security in the sense that whiteness is assumed to give you kind of security. He still is on the receiving end of racial abuse and so on.
This is, first of all, we were talking about how to decide who is a Jew. I guess you just put that caption, anyone who gets upset is Jewish, right? That just makes that decision. But no, it's really an interesting story. First of all, you talked a lot about the fact that generally speaking, the Jewish community in the UK is quieter, right? And kind of doesn't want to make a fuss. So I don't know how this feels for you or that this is becoming such an issue. Is it a good thing that it seems that like the Jewish community is fighting back on this? Or is it you're just like, we want to be left alone? Don't talk about it so much.
This is what's so fascinating about the to be in this country right now with these arguments. And in some ways, people think it was all blown open by the Jeremy Corbyn episode. You remember the former leader of the Labour Party, who was at the centre of allegations and controversy about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party for the entire 5 years of his leadership. A lot of people said, that has made Jews in Britain come out and be more defiant. Or was it the case that Jews just had become more defiant and therefore stood up to Jeremy Corbyn? Which came first? But the shift is real. And here is the shift in a nutshell. The Jewish community was seen for decades as being quietist, meaning almost as a philosophy, as a strategy, keep your head down, don't make a noise, don't make trouble. The famous example is when Oswald Mosley, the leader of the British Union of Fascists, really a would-be British Hitler, chose to march through Cable Street in the East End, the Jewish East End then, of London. The official Jewish community position at the time was, let's not make a big protest, let's not organize against this, but rather hope that it just passes. And it was left to independent and other Jewish organizations, Jewish socialists and communists, working with their non-Jewish allies, to protest. And it led to this seminal event in British Jewish history, the Battle of Cable Street. But the official community leadership, stay down, keep your head down, wait for the moment to pass. That, in a way, was how we saw ourselves for many decades, to the point where when Jews even talked about being Jewish, they would say, oh, that guy over there, is he Jewish? And the voice would drop, and something changed. And I think it was already changing, but it absolutely it erupted into public view during the Corbyn era. And the moment of clarity was in the spring of 2018, when Jews demonstrated in Parliament against the Labour Party under the slogan, enough is enough. And that phrase was so evocative because it captured this sense of exasperation and of the sense that Jews had it up to here with keeping their head down and making nice. Mm-hmm. And now we were going to say, enough is enough. We are going to defend ourselves. And that has been captured online by various Jewish celebrities, the actress Tracy Ann Oberman, the TV host Rachel Riley, and a whole lot of others tweeting and going head-to-head with anti-Semites, confronting them. Baddiel has now done this book. Jewish journalists and columnists like me writing about this, not just in the Jewish press, but in the Times or the Guardian or elsewhere, and sticking up for ourselves and becoming a bit more like American Jews, actually, a bit loud, a bit shouty, and a bit more defiant. And this, and as I say, I think in a way it may have been Jeremy Corbyn's misfortune to walk into a changed Jewish community. This was not your grandfather's or even father's Jewish community. This one was one that was ready to roll up its sleeves and fight back. And so that is why, now the deputy leader of the Labour Party makes a little slip, really, about the Muslim leader of the Scottish Labour Party, and Jews make a noise and say, hold on, What about us?
Yeah.
We count. And that is a big shift, I think.
So I think we should move on to discussing chutzpah mensch. If we're being so loud about our Judaism, let's go about that.
You see, that is to prove the point that we are so out and loud and proud that we are happy to make a noise. I mean, I mentioned American Jews, and so they were very quick off the mark about the stage design. I like this story of the CPAC conference. You know about the ultra-right gathering, or ultra-right, it's now pretty mainstream right, in the United States. The group CPAC, they had their big gathering last weekend, and people noticed there was something odd about the pattern of the stage set. I mean, people are nothing if not sharp-eyed, and they noticed,
and they're stuck at home. They were looking for things to do.
They noticed that the set design, and you can look at it up online. It's not a swastika, but it is rather a symbol known as a Nazi rune, a sort of Odinist symbol. Let me find the Odal or Othala rune, the symbol that was actually on some Nazi uniforms. And if you look from above, it does look like that. The designers and so on have all said, look, we had no idea about that. And you know what? In a fair world, I would say I'm pretty sure the graphic designers who build stage designs for CPAC, and the same company did them also for MSNBC, I'm pretty sure they didn't know about this. But the reason why I give the Chutzpah Award is you absolutely know that if this was a group of the left, of some group among Democrats, Fox News and the rest would be immediately on their case saying this is outrageous and shows that the Democrats are all Nazis. So I think it is a chutzpah for CPAC to have had this as their stage design, set design, when we know they stick it to their opponents over the even unconscious and unintended lapses. So that's a chutzpah nominee for this week.
Chutzpah nominee accepted. Mine is less original, I must say. It's episode 8, and this is the first time we're giving out a chutzpah nominee to Benjamin Netanyahu, by the way, who hasn't been, I think, named in this episode thus far. He's obviously during an election campaign, and he has began his interview blitz a little sooner than usual. And what you've been hearing more and more from him is basically labeling sort of any doubts or questions about his policies as childish or idiotic. So let's hear a little bit of that for a second.
אני קורא לזה ננה. אז ננה. והפקות והפקה. פקה וששה.
So I'll just explain that. The na part was targeting us, the media, doubting his response to different variants and basically saying that we are, petty. And the Shasha part, I'm kind of embarrassed to even repeat it, was aimed at Dr. Ifat Shasha Biton, who's number 2 at Gidon Saal's party, used to be a Likud minister and was very, very a staunch opponent of his coronavirus restrictions. It kind of sounded not only derogatory, but a bit misogynistic. And she also said it was mocking her ethnic background. But the bigger chutzpah here, I think, and this is why I think he is a nominee this week, is that he has been, in every interview and even taking it up a notch, saying he is the only one who brought Israel the vaccinations and the only one who will continue to bring Israel its vaccinations. It's amazing. So I was just looking, I just saw a tweet by Christiana Manpour from CNN who got vaccinated, and she tweeted, "Proud, please protected. Thank you, NHS. Thank you, science." Right? But here, what he expects is to be thanked personally for doing this, right? And since I don't, or at least I didn't see this headline in the New York Times that Pfizer has said that if Netanyahu isn't elected, it will discontinue selling vaccinations to Israel, I think this awards him with a chutzpah nominee.
I think he's a deserving and worthy winner. You could also, of course, in the same spirit, throw in Donald Trump, who admitted he got vaccinated quietly, having sponsored and encouraged all this vaccine skepticism earlier on about COVID. But let's go to the happier task that falls to us, which is the Mensch Award. I'm going to nominate the Iranian judo champion Saeed Molaei, or formerly Iranian because he ended up fleeing the country, who is now to be the subject of a scripted TV series based on his decision to not bow to the pressure from his handlers who pressured him not to compete. against fellow judoist, if that's the right word, judoka, Sagi Muki from Israel. The Iranian authorities did not want him competing against an Israeli, but Saeed Molaei went ahead anyway, and now MGM and United Artists have teamed up with Tadmor Entertainment in Israel to develop a series based on the judoka duo and their stance. And I just think it's a nice story how the two of them did decide to compete against each other and became great friends. So I think he might get this week's Mensch Award.
Good nominee if we're on the issue of entertainment, television, movies, etc. And in the spirit of having a menschette, this week I think I give my nominee to the lovely Israeli actress Shira Haas, who is not only nominated for Golden Globe leading actress for Unorthodox. I almost said unholy, but
they wish.
She is now going to play Golda Meir in a new production by Barbara Streisand. I mean, I'm saying all these names together. I'm verklempt. That is the only word you can say, right? To these names all combined together. So I think that's a reason to be proud. And she's my Mensch nominee.
Oh, it's a very good choice, and verklempt is the word. And yet, we like, she didn't spoil us enough with Yentl. She's now giving us the Golda Meir story. I mean, two stories about Golda Meir, who the first is that she has a sort of hallowed place in our family history for two reasons. The first is, as I've mentioned, I think before, my late father, Michael Friedman, presented a Jewish radio show in this country.
You don't have to be Jewish.
You don't have to be Jewish. That was the title. On the BBC in the 70s and in the 80s and 90s. And an early guest was the then British Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, who got into some trouble for being so warm in his relations with Israel, some trouble with the British left, even back then. And he had once been seen greeting his opposite number from Israel, Golda Meir, not just with a formal handshake, but with a kiss on the cheek. And she said, isn't this going to give you some problems with your anti-Israel left? And he said, if they ask, I'll say the reason I did it, Golda, was just sex.
I can't believe it.
And he said that on the radio.
This is a historic scoop. And this was on your father's program?
Wilson said it to my father, whether I could find the tape of it or not. But it was his quip to Golda Meir that it's just this sheer sexual animal attraction between the two of us, Wilson and Golda.
And this was an acceptable joke in the 70s, right?
Yes, it's a joke you probably couldn't make now. It's quite true. but even before the You Don't Have to Be Jewish program, Golda Meir, or rather Golda Meyerson, as then was, had a hallowed place, because if you dig out from the archives the initial Aliyah papers, the migration papers that were stamped as Golda Meyerson arrived in pre-state Palestine as then was, the name of the British official who stamped the piece of paper she came in at Jaffa port is one Nathan Isidore Mindel, who was my great-great-uncle and one of the characters in the book I wrote about my family, Jacob's Gift. So there is a deep family connection with Golda Meir. I hope Shira Haas brings all of this into episode 1.
Of course, I'm making sure of it right now. First of all, any of us, and I'm one of those who read Jacob's Gift, know of this important part, right, that the Friedland family played in Jewish history, letting in the young Golda Meirson. But this is remarkable, and it brings us to our theme of this episode, which was Jonathan Friedland's books. From beginning to end.
Why don't we do this every single week? We can go. There's 11 books. We can go through them.
God knows there are enough books to go around. This is me being very envious of you. I'll have you know I'm the author of many unwritten novels, Jonathan. So
I want to read them. But we'll alternate weeks. We'll do a book club of my things, and then we'll go back through your TV reports from New York and all around the world.
Sure.
I mean, you and I will enjoy it. The audience maybe not so much, but you and I will enjoy it. If you have enjoyed this one, I have to tell you, it is getting really almost embarrassing how you have not yet subscribed. We need you to subscribe. We want you to follow us, and do give us a gleaming review if you feel so moved, and of course recommend us to your friends.
Norton, and if you do subscribe, then Jonathan promises not to lay in the Jewish guilt next episode, but he'll continue to do that until you do.
It's the only way.
We want to thank our executive producer, Lior Friedman, and also thank yous out to Rom Atik, Yair Bashan, and Arad Eshel for original music. And thank you for listening and being with us. Jonathan, we shall meet next week.
See you then.